We've assembled another powerhouse panel today with two fantastic guests. I'm joined by Larry Klayman and Jack Cashill. Gentlemen, welcome back to the show. How are you both doing today?
You're welcome, Jason. Nice to see you. Nice to see Jack, my good friend.
Yeah, you too, Larry, and I'm doing well.
Yeah, you guys are both looking great. I think everybody has upgraded internet since the last time we spoke because everybody's looking really sharp and smooth. We're going to be talking today about some of the political machinations inside the D.C. Bar Association and its disciplinary council. Jack, this is something that you actually know quite a bit about. Did you want to kick it off, perhaps?
Let me tee it up and we'll go to Jack on that, sure. Jason. You know, this is part and parcel to the world we live in today. It's a full court press by the left to silence the right, to silence conservatives, whether it's the deep state and the executive branch with President Trump illegally surveilling him. And of course, we have the issue now with coronavirus. Did the CIA give the president warning of what it knew was going to happen in China to try to harm his chances in 2020? Or whether it's the federal judiciary, which is still slanted terribly left. And in fact, of the Trump appointees that are on the bench, I found most of them don't have the courage to do what needs to be done. They're more establishment Republicans, rhinos, than conservatives. And then, of course, you have the legislative branch, which is totally out of control with Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff and Nadler. But coupled with that are certain bar authorities, not all, there are good bar authorities, but the District of Columbia is highly politicized. It's very leftist, and it's trying, in my view, and we'll explain that further, to remove conservative voices from the bar, people that actually bring cases like Larry Klayman against people like the Clintons, people like the Obamas, and others. And Jack wrote a column recently because there was a hearing committee, and this is on appeal, and I'm confident of ultimate success, but a hearing committee that heard a case that's at this point 11 years old, where it recommended that I be suspended for 33 months with a reinstatement provision. And sitting on that hearing committee were two ultra-leftists, one in particular by the name of Michael Tiger, who has a very long history of being radical leftist and in fact is an avowed communist. And to go back, and Jack can expound further, he was a clerk to Justice William Brennan. The book, The Brethren by Bob Woodward, points out, a respected book, obviously a very respected investigative journalist, that he was fired, Tiger, for his subversive ties, that J. Edgar Hoover actually intervened, the Chief Justice, Earl Warren, intervened, and he was fired as he began his job for Brennan. He probably has hated conservatives ever since, and he's been involved in a number of very leftist causes, and some research turned up a picture of him wearing a Cuba t-shirt, which you have as your meme for this show, and a thank you letter from Fidel Castro, effusive thank you letter. And he's written recently, and we'll get into that, what in effect is a renewed communist manifesto against a legal system that is other than slanted far left. But this is the person who primarily was involved in recommending that I be suspended. It's now up on appeal. But the D.C. Bar Disciplinary Council itself is very far left. And the head of it now, Hamilton Fox, we'll also discuss that, has donated to various leftist politicians like Obama and others, and the rest of them have as well. And this is what you're dealing with today. And you're dealing with a situation where this bar is entertaining complaints against people like Kellyanne Conway, White House counselor, or comments she made on MSNBC. This guy Tiger and 15 other law professors filed a complaint against her. It's presumably still pending. And in addition to that, there are cases that were filed with regard to David Kendall, for instance, the Clinton's lawyer, for helping Hillary destroy the 33,000 emails, but those get thrown in the trash. So that's just a little introduction. I'll turn it over to Jack because he wrote a very fine column about this and wrote about Tiger.
Just before we hand it to Jack, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Larry, you said two very important things. The suspension that's proposed for you is 33 months. I find that to be an odd and specific duration. Why not 36? Why not 24? 33? You also cited Hillary Clinton's missing emails, of which I personally believe there are hundreds of thousands, but it's always been told to us there's 33,000. I think that number 33 is used as a steganographic marker to send messages to people. And
well, maybe, Jason, but I don't want to get that far out on this. I want to keep it to the facts. I don't want to get into conspiracy theory. These are hard facts.
Yeah.
Okay. And, I respect the District of Columbia Bar, but it's been hijacked by people who are leftists that have a political agenda. And that's what I want known, because it's a full court press by the left to eliminate conservative voices. So, I want to turn it over to Jack if he can elucidate on what he wrote.
Yeah, just to put this in perspective, and let's talk about months and suspensions. I'm going to talk about a 36-month suspension. 36-month suspension went to Sandy Berger after he was caught stealing and destroying highly classified documents, some of them original. He was caught by the archivists. In fact, they were the heroes of this story, because when he took him to the Justice Department, they refused to tell the 9/11 Commission, who was still meeting, that they were about to interview a fellow who they'd been caught on multiple occasions stealing and destroying classified documents. They refused to tell the 9/11 Commission, so they interviewed him without this knowledge. All the Justice Department attorneys, I checked their donation records. They're all Democrats. Bush was obviously the president. He had a Republican attorney general, but they lacked the will to crack down on their own Justice Department. So Berger gets a recommended $10,000 fine and a 36-month security clearance suspension, which allowed him to get back in time to advise Barack Obama in 2008. This is the wild disparity that we're facing today. And I looked at Larry's case, and this guy Tiger is still a person of influence, is a testament to the fact that there are very few checks and balances historically on what goes on in Washington jurisprudence. This is a city, by the way, to put it in perspective, that gave Donald Trump 4% of its vote, which means that for every grand jury, a Republican can expect to have one sympathizer, right? For every juror, he can expect to have a half a sympathizer. So the notion that you would put a Roger Stone before a jury like this, or any Republican accused of any relatively, politically related crime, is just, de facto wrong. I mean, right off the bat,
Well, it's interesting. I'll be throwing a little humor here, Jack. Sandy Berger, I was at Judicial Watch at the time, and we actually were pursuing him for taking those documents out of the National Archives. He stuffed them into his pants and left. And I used to joke it was the only time that anyone in the Clinton administration was ever accused of putting something in their pants.
Well, I guess it was an anxiety thing for him too. Then it's like
right.
He had to relieve his anxiety by stealing documents, hiding them at a construction site. But that was, that I'm sure whoever was watching Sandy Berger was not, all the Russians were thrown off the trail by that, and then admittedly destroying them,
Talking about the Clintons, this is kind of a segue, and then I'd like to get back to your article because it was very well written and very scholarly, is that Tiger and this other person that sat on this committee, Anthony Fitch, I believe that Fitch recruited Tiger onto the committee, and Tiger's very leftist too. And in their recommendation, they talk about how I've had this, in effect, a jihad against the Clintons for all these years. Well, this case involved a woman when I was single, by the way, that my heart went out to, never any kind of allegation of sexual harassment or anything like that, but I cared about her. I tried to help her. She was very damaged. She claimed she was sexually harassed at Voice of America. It was being run by, this was the Persian News Network, someone who was the advisor to the Ayatollah, believe it or not. This is who Obama left in there. And the managers went against her. Her family was in the Shah's regime. And there were two factions at Voice of America, one pro-Shah, one pro-Ayatollah. And it was all very political. And I tried to settle the case, but I couldn't settle it. So we decided we would bring a lawsuit. And this woman agreed to that against the Voice of America Board of Governors. And who sat on top of that? Hillary Clinton. She was the head of it, as the head of the Department of State. So they vilify me in this recommendation that, I only brought the case because of Hillary Clinton and I was pursuing my agenda against the Clintons. And I never made it political. I simply joined her with other members of the Board of Governors, one of which was then my friend, Blanquita Cullum, who I was trying to get to help this woman. And it shows you the political aspect of this, that they resent the fact, they hate the fact that I have tried to hold the Clintons accountable all these years for their various scandals, crimes, and everything else. And this is part and parcel. And when you get to a situation where they even entertain complaints by Tiger and 15 other leftist law professors against Kellyanne Conway, who's not even an active member of the D.C. bar, she is a lawyer, but she never kept her dues up to date and put on inactive status, from remarks she made on MSNBC, you know what you're dealing with. And what happened in this bar disciplinary council is that they used to have somebody that ran it by the name of Gene Shipp. He was a very fair man. The Clintons used to have people file cases against me, and Gene Shipp would throw the complaints in the trash because they were completely political. But it flipped over to this guy, Hamilton Fox, who, believe it or not, when I was leaving Judicial Watch, actually was representing me through his law firm, Sutherland, Asbill, and Brennan. He's got a conflict of interest in my severance negotiations. And, since then it's ripened into litigation with Judicial Watch all these different years. But this guy has given to Barack Obama, he's given to various leftist candidates, Murphy for Congress in Maryland. You've got others at the bar, such as Elizabeth Herman, who's given to Hillary Clinton. She was there. One time she made a statement in front of me. I don't like the way you practice law. Another lawyer there said, Larry, they're going to try to remove you from the practice of law, somebody who was sympathetic, but didn't have the courage to take anybody on. And then you have a Julia Porter, who's an ultra-leftist as well. This disciplinary council is filled with these rabid leftists that think that they can use their power, and they claim that they have immunity from their unethical conduct to be held accountable. And that's what you're dealing with today. And it's just part and parcel to everything that's going on, whether it's the deep state and the executive branch or the legislative branch or the ultra-leftist federal judiciary, particularly in D.C. This is what you're up against. And I relish the fight. I mean, this is me. It's Larry Klayman. But I want people to know about it because the D.C. bar, not everybody, there are good people there, but these people that are in charge of the disciplinary apparatus, are trying to harm people like Larry Klayman and others, Kellyanne Conway. And then I have a friend, Ty Clevenger, who a very good lawyer from the Justice Department, he's worked with me in the past, is that he was subject to this. And who did he have sit on his committee? He had brought cases concerning the Clintons. David Kendall, the Clintons' lawyer, sits on a disciplinary council committee. I mean, it's just unreal. But Jack, I'd like you to, get into your article because you look at it from a good perspective.
Well, historical perspective is interesting to me because the fact that Brennan, who was not a particularly ideological judge, was willing to have Tiger removed for his, conspicuous injection of ideology into his decision making, it testifies to a different era. I'm sure that there was some of this going on forever, probably from the first time, Alexander Hamilton squared off against Aaron Burr, but it has gotten progressively more and more overt. And right now, as your case is indicative, there is almost no field of battle in which they will not inject their politics with one goal, and that is to suppress speech, because they're selling something that can't be sold on an open market, and the only way they can sell it is if the voices of reason and truth in advertising are removed from the marketplace. And Larry's case is one case out of, Larry, we've worked on others together. I mean, hundreds of cases like this. And it's so hard to draw attention to a given case because there's so many others out there.
That's true. And how did Hamilton Fox become the head of the DC Bar Disciplinary Council? Okay, because at the time there was a head of the Board of Governors that sits above Disciplinary Council by the name of Robert Bernius. Now, if you look at his FEC records, he's given heavily to Hillary Clinton and John Kerry, among others. And then you have others like Elizabeth Herman who've given to the Clintons. In fact, when Ty Clevenger filed a complaint against David Kendall for destroying the 33,000 emails, because that's obstruction of justice, that's dishonest, that's unethical, it was Herman who made the decision to throw that complaint in the trash. And Herman is given, of course, to Hillary Clinton. And she's the one who effectively told me she wanted to remove me from the practice of law because she didn't like the way I practiced law. In addition, Hamilton Fox said the same exact thing to me. I went into his office one day to discuss what was going on, and he wouldn't discuss certain things as to why this proceeding was going forward with this young woman I tried to help. And he told me I couldn't discuss certain things. And I told him, I said, you can't tell me what to discuss. I'm here in good faith. And he gets up and says, you leave my office right now. And he charges at me, physically charges at me. And I said, I'm going to have to file suit here, which I have. And he says, I welcome that, Larry, because we'll expose who you are. Okay, I don't like the way you practice law.
Wow.
And, this is what you're dealing with over there. These people are rabid ideologues that are in control of disciplinary counsel. And then they claim that they've got absolute immunity because the D.C. Court of Appeals gave it to them. Well, you know what? No prosecutor has absolute immunity. I was a prosecutor. I didn't have absolute immunity. When you abuse process, you lose your immunity. If you bring actions for improper purposes, you lose that. And also there's a legal argument. The D.C. Court of Appeals cannot bestow immunity, even though there's some dicta in some of their opinions, on the prosecutors. That has to be done by the D.C. City Council, which is the legislative branch of the District of Columbia, just like Congress, would bestow immunity on judges and on federal prosecutors. So there is no immunity for them, but they hide behind that. And if you try to file an ethics complaint against them, they throw that in the trash and they say, we're immune, we can do whatever we want. And this is a very dangerous situation because without lawyers like me or lawyers like Ty Clevenger or other lawyers who are willing to stick their neck out, you lose your line of defense against the tyranny in government. And, and I might add this. I know I'm rambling a bit, but I'm writing a new book, Jack. I'm not as good an author as you are, okay? But I'm pretty good. And I'm writing a book called It Takes a Revolution. Forget the Scandal Industry. And I was reading Alexis de Tocqueville last Saturday, as well as Alexander Hamilton. The two are at odds in many ways. De Tocqueville was a Frenchman who, after the French Revolution, was analyzing the system of government that we set up in this country. And he basically said, and he said straight up, actually, he said, countries will go into a revolutionary mode if they don't have a legal system that will protect the people. They don't have a judiciary, they don't have lawyers, they don't have that. And he was looking at the United States with admiration, thinking that that's what we had set up at the time. And we did. And Alexander Hamilton created the federal judiciary, for instance. I mean, he was instrumental in it. And he gave so much power to these federal judges, as later was enacted into our Constitution. But when those federal judges and when the other branches of government, including disciplinary councils of bars, start working against the people, then you're in a revolutionary mode, as de Tocqueville predicted could happen. And as Thomas Jefferson said would happen every other generation. He predicted this, and this is the state of affairs that we're in today. And without lawyers that will stick their neck out to protect the American people and judges who will enforce the law, we are in effect, a revolution.
A critarchy is the word, ruled by judges. I have a book coming out, and in fact, you can pre-order it on Amazon now. Not to be too shameless in my plugging, but it's called Unmasking Obama. And the subtitle, though, goes to the heart of our larger story here, Larry and Jason. That is the fight to tell the true story of a failed presidency. And to Larry's point, at least 5 of the people I profile who are citizen journalists, I use the word samizdat, which is the Russian word for underground journalism. At least 5 of them were arrested.
Wow.
You look at the case of, one conspicuous one is David Daleiden, the fellow who did the reporting on Planned Parenthood. And you know who Planned Parenthood hired to discredit Daleiden? If you recall, he did this whole series of incredibly graphic, incredibly damning undercover videos from Planned Parenthoods across the country, where they showed fetal baby parts, just them picking up, talking about how much they're worth on the open market, et cetera. It was utterly damning. In 2015, even Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were running from Planned Parenthood. So what does Planned Parenthood do? They hire a certain firm to analyze the raw video that the Leiden did. And you know who the firm is? Fusion GPS, right?
Oh.
And Fusion GPS comes out and says, "Oh, this has been edited." They do this all the time. Everyone,
right.
It's been edited. And the Leiden said, "Yeah, we turned off the cameras when we went to the bathroom." Otherwise, it's all raw footage. There is no denying what you're looking at. But what the major media did then is they ran with the Fusion. They didn't bother looking at the video themselves. They ran with the Fusion GPS story. And in 2015, Fusion GPS didn't mean anything particularly, and discredited, fake. And then they used their influence, their friends in both in Houston and Harris County, in the Attorney General's office, and in California with Kamala Harris, to have the Leiden arrested for impersonating or entering a Planned Parenthood clinic under false pretenses. Right?
Well, that's what we're dealing with today.
Yeah. Who knew?
You talk about Fusion GPS and the Steele dossier. Who was the law firm behind that? Perkins Coie. Okay,
right.
Now, has D.C. Bar Disciplinary Counsel done anything with Perkins Coie? I'm fighting them, across the board for Chief Justice Roy Moore, for Sheriff Joe Arpaio. They're everywhere. This is the firm of the Democratic Party. It's the firm of the left. They're the ones who greased it allegedly for Hillary Clinton. With regard to the Steele dossier.
Right. Also,
but no action against them. They're not concerned with that. Let them run wild. Okay. Now let's go back to Tiger. And I sent to Jason clips of his new book, Mythologies of State and Monopoly Power by Michael Tiger. Okay. It's basically a modern communist manifesto. And if you look, and Jack also has seen this, at page 3, he states, "Throughout these essays, I repeat a theme. The law is not what it says, but what it does. What it does is so often based on assumptions that time and the tide of events have shown to be false. Karl Marx wrote," this is who Tiger admires and follows. Karl Marx wrote, "The law shows it's a posteriori to the people as God to his servant Moses." As Anatole France famously wrote, "The majestic equality of the laws which forbid the rich as well as the poor to sleep under bridges, to beg in the streets, and to steal bread." It goes on and on. This book is endorsed by Angela Davis, a communist from Berkeley. We know that, very infamous. And Bernadine Dorn, we can talk about that, from the Weather Underground, Bill Ayer's colleague, who by the grace of God is not serving a life sentence for domestic terrorism. And here's what she says about the book, Tiger's book: "An incisive, unsparing, creative, and brilliant critique of capitalist law and its dire human consequences." Bernadine Dorn, co-editor with Bill Ayer's Race Course Against White Supremacy. This is who the bar has on disciplinary ad hoc committees making recommendations about a conservative lawyer like me, along with his colleague Anthony Fitch, who was the chairman of that, who probably recruited him on that committee. The two of them look like the Goldust twins during this hearing. Very disrespectful towards me. And, this is dangerous when something like that happens. And I should have picked up on it sooner before the hearing took place, but I didn't, because I trusted that the bar had in place people that were responsible, that were neutral, that frankly weren't dyed-in-the-wool communists that would hate someone like Larry Klayman.
To put Bernadine Dorn in a little historical perspective, it was she of Larry, you recall the famous fork salute? When she, after the Manson killings in 1969, she praised them, and she praised in particular them for sticking a fork in the pregnant belly of Sharon Tate. This is the woman, and she married to Bill Ayer. She went on for another 10 years of bombing. She was the revolutionary hottie of her day. I mean, Ayers was her subservient at the time, and now they are. Well, Ayers and Obama were buddies, and they're now back in the portals of power. I mean, it is a little frightening, and I'm glad we have people like Larry willing to fight the fight.
Well, Jack, sorry, Larry, for just 1 second, can I ask? Sure. Do either of you guys recognize this young boy? Is this Chesa Bodine?
I don't recognize him, but they raised Jason Bodine, whose parents were involved in a shootout in which several armed guards were killed I believe it was in Nyack, New York. They were robbing with the Black Liberation Army, and they were in the process of robbing a Brinks truck, an armored money truck. His father is still in prison. His mother was released, I believe. But they've raised Jason Bodine, Boudin, or whatever his name is pronounced, and now he is God help us, the district attorney of San Francisco. So they perpetuate themselves,
Well, let's go back to what Bernardine Dohrn said, because this is the communist ideology of Karl Marx, is that the ends justify the means. And that's what Tiger was saying in that quote that I read. The law is what you want it to be.
Right.
Use it for your ends. And that's extremely dangerous, because the law is the law. And I don't, condone when so-called Republican judges bend the law for what they consider to be their ends. And I certainly don't condone it when leftist judges and others in bar associations do the same thing. And I'm not condemning everybody at the D.C. bar, but they've got to clean house. They've got to clean out this rat's nest which exists. And when they claim immunity, it's unbelievable that they claim that they're above the law. Now, let me raise one other thing, and this matters public. There are people by the name of J.P. and John Simkowitz. They went through a 13-year proceeding before the D.C. Bar Disciplinary Council. It was alleged that they had somehow acted unfairly with an elderly woman and, misappropriated property in an estate. I'm just paraphrasing. 13 years. This very rabid leftist lawyer by the name of Julia Porter, who I'm wrestling with right now, she persecuted them, made various false statements in the proceeding. She claims that she's immune. And then when they ultimately lost after 13 years, when D.C. Bar Disciplinary lost with Julia Porter at the helm, lying her way through the proceeding, she then has a former colleague, Michael Frisch, who's now a Georgetown law professor, smear the Simkowitzes in blogs to harm them. Now, it was so severe that even Bernius, who's given heavily to Democrats, who was head of the board, ordered an internal review, but nothing's happened. It sits there because they circle the wagons and they, generally speaking, protect themselves. And that's what you're dealing with here. So that's why I've been forced to bring lawsuits, against disciplinary counsel, against Julia Porter, against Hamilton Fox and others. And it's going through the courts. And these judges will probably protect them too. But I want the American people to know what goes on, because without strong advocates in our legal system, who is there to protect you? And if you look at the left, I was friendly with Ramsey Clark. Ramsey Clark was the Attorney General of Lyndon Johnson. And he was a leftist, but we respected each other, because you can be a leftist, you can be a conservative, you have things in common. You have a distrust of excessive government power. But Ramsey was an honest guy. And, there are people like that. William Kunstler, another one, from the left, Larry Klayman is the only one on the right, frankly, in modern history who has stuck his neck out to the extent that he has. So I'm the biggest target, and if I do say so myself, on their scalp list. And I want to add one other thing. I made a very close friend and colleague by the name of Ronald Rotunda. He was a very fine man. He was the leading expert in legal ethics in this country. And Harvard graduate, he worked on the Watergate Committee. He was a conservative, and that was quite unique in the legal profession, particularly in the legal profession when it comes to constitutional law and legal ethics. And Rotunda testified on my behalf posthumously in this case. He died in the interim, and he through an affidavit that he had prepared, in effect. And Rotunda would tell me, because they went after him too. Here's the leading legal expert in this country. He's written textbook after textbook. They tried to get him disbarred. And he said, Larry, they want scalps. That's what they want. And he's probably the only legal expert that would stick his neck out to that extent. But I might also add that in this case that we're talking about, or in other cases, there are leftists who have integrity. Erwin Chemerinsky from the University of California at Berkeley Law School, Bolt Hall, the dean. Erwin has integrity. There are people on the left that have it, but the people that are in control of the DC Bar Disciplinary Council today, and people that are sitting on hearing committees, a lot of them don't have integrity. And this needs to be made known to the American people. And that's why I hope people will support what I'm doing, because it's very expensive. The Simcoins has spent several $100,000. I've spent several $100,000. Go to Larry Klayman LegalDefenseFund.com and contribute to that, because what they try to do is, even if they don't win in the end, they try to put you out of business. They try to bankrupt you by having to defend yourself. And these proceedings take years. This one proceeding is already in the 11th year, and it'll probably go on for another 2 or 3 before it's resolved. So this is what you're dealing with.
Yeah, I should say, Jason, that Larry and I are involved in another case that's a testament to what's happened to legal jurisprudence over time. Historically, the left had a vested interest in declaring conspicuously guilty people innocent. This dates back to Sacco and Vanzetti, Alger Hiss, the Rosenbergs, Leonard Peltier, on and on and on through the present, Mumi Abu Jamal. I mean, people who were Jamal had a smoking gun in his hand. I mean, it doesn't get much more obvious than that. Hurricane Carter. In the case that Larry has taken up, and I'm peripherally involved in this case, is I think the bellwether case of when the left was now content with declaring innocent people guilty, which is a dark, dark turn that's gone uncommented on. And I'm talking here about the case of George Zimmerman, who, anyone who followed the case knew within weeks that it was totally within his rights. He did what any sane person should have done under the same circumstances, what any good citizen would have done under the same circumstances. And yet the left was fully committed to sending him to prison for the rest of his life to satisfy their political agenda. This is as if,
wasn't it? Weren't they going for the death penalty, Jack, on Mr. Zimmerman?
But it might as well have been a death penalty, because Zimmerman probably wouldn't have survived in prison given the right. Incredible hostility they evoked among the black population of Florida towards him. But it's as if, though, now when you're watching, let's say, To Kill a Mockingbird, the left used to identify with Atticus Finch. Now they're the mob. Now they're the mob that wants to take the innocent person like a Larry Klayman or a George Zimmerman and do what they want with them. The law be damned. It's a dark turn, and it's gone almost uncommented on.
And it continues, Jack. It wasn't isolated to that time. George Zimmerman, as revealed by Joel Gilbert, a very fine producer and filmmaker that we both know, and a colleague as well as a writer, uncovered that a false witness, a phony, fraudulent witness, was presented to get George Zimmerman arrested, indicted, and tried. And that the state of Florida knew or should have known about that. The prosecutors, I love Florida, it's my home state, but I'll tell you something, they did wrong here, so they've been sued. The family and Benjamin Crump are alleged to have done this. Crump was the family lawyer. Crump hasn't even written a book. He's profiteering off of all of this. I'm paraphrasing, legal genocide against colored people by whites. Okay, I'm just paraphrasing.
That's close. Yeah, right.
And it's become an industry, a race-baiting industry. And we're actually trying to bring the races together by exposing the truth. But it continues to this day. And Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren, when they thought they needed some more African-American votes because they weren't doing real well. African-Americans are very discerning people. They understand what it's like at street level. And they apparently viewed both of them as phonies, so they didn't support them. And so on Trayvon Martin's birthday, his 25th birthday, they come out. Pete Buttigieg accuses George Zimmerman of being a white supremacist, of engaging in gun violence, and being a racist. And Elizabeth Warren did the same thing. And we sent them an email. We said, we better retract that. You're inciting violence. Already one person is doing time for 20 years in Florida for shooting at Zimmerman at close range. Thank God he missed.
Yeah.
And so this is these politicians on the left uses this continuously to make a point. And then just today I saw something on the internet by the Daily Something where the commentator accuses George Zimmerman of murdering Trayvon Martin because he hates black people. You know what? Look at Joel's film, okay, the Trayvon hoax. George Zimmerman, A, is not even white. Okay, he's Hispanic. And B, he was helping young black kids before this whole incident occurred in a community outreach program.
And C, the year before this happened, Larry, as you know, George Zimmerman led a one-person crusade to get justice for a black homeless man who had been beaten by the son of a white police lieutenant who went unpunished after it happened. George personally went to all the black churches, handed out flyers, spoke publicly at a town hall meeting. The media had access to this audio of George speaking out at this meeting, and they suppressed it because they wanted to make this Hispanic guy who is a Obama supporter, a civil rights activist, and a mentor to two black teens out to be a white supremacist. And what's horrifying is they got away with it.
And they're continuing to use it. They beat him over the head every single day. And this gets back to Tiger and his modern communist manifesto, you know, with his Cuba T-shirt, his thank you notes from Castro, pictures with Ramon Castro. You know, the ends justify the means. Destroy whoever you have to destroy because there's a bigger objective here. It's to turn this country into a socialist Bolshevik gulag, you know, at the end of the day. And, you know, this is why Bernie and the squad now have hit the skids, because the American people are beginning to see the truth. And the fact that Joe Biden, someone who's not even there mentally, for whatever reason, can rout Bernie Sanders, tells you that the left has gone too far. So just as, you know, Bernie Sanders has been relegated to the ash heap of political history, along with Ilham Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Linda Sarsour, and the rest of his supporters, then we need to clean house in the D.C. Bar Disciplinary Council. They need to look in-house and do their job, not like they promised with the Simkowitzes, where they did nothing. You know, that was just to get the heat off their back at the time, but to actually do something. And we need to root out this kind of intellectual and other corruption in all the other branches of government. And if I might add, Jack, comment on this, because I want to know why. I do these daily podcasts on Radio America, and they get transmitted, you know, off of our website and Spotify and iTunes and Patreon. I want to know why the president wasn't advised sooner by our deep state at the CIA that there was a problem with the coronavirus in China. You know, they do mass surveillance on the American people. That's no problem without probable cause. They have capabilities of satellite interceptions. They have human surveillance on the ground. But the president apparently was not advised so he could even act quicker. Granted, he acted quicker than the Europeans, but, you know, then so does anybody. But why? Is it because this deep state wants to destroy him, the Brennans, the Clappers, the minions they left behind? And this deep state exists in the D.C. bar, it exists in the media, it exists on Capitol Hill, and it exists in the judiciary. And they are doing a full court press to try to remove not just the president, but anybody who supports the president, like yours truly.
Yeah, and part of the answer is even a little simpler, and that is, and we see it in the AOC tweets, that if you avoid a Chinese restaurant, you're a racist, is the necessity of protecting China. Not just because it is another race, but also because we are so, especially our high-tech companies are so deeply invested there, you know, that they don't want this information out. If they could help it, if they could suppress it, they would have, you know.
No, you're right, Jack. And, you know, the funny thing is that Chinese Americans, I mean, they're really good people. They came here, they fled the tyranny, you know, in communist China. They fled suppression even in a very right-wing government in Taiwan, many of them. And, you know, dictatorship, Chiang Kai-shek. But it's not the Chinese people. It's this evil Chinese government, okay? And people need to understand that. So it's not racist that you're going to take the Chinese on. And in fact, I'm preparing a lawsuit right now to hold the Chinese accountable for all the damage they've done to people's health, be a class action, and with regard to the harm that they've done economically to our country. I believe that it was likely, and it's been reported a number of places, that this was a leak, maybe accidental, probably accidental, from a Chinese weapons facility in Wuhan. Now, other people, you know, have other conspiracy theorists. I'm not going to go that far, but in any event, the Chinese are responsible. Why does the American taxpayer have to pay for the damage. Why does President Trump have to, pledge $50 billion to the Small Business Administration and other perks when we're already facing tens of trillions of dollars in debt? The Chinese should pay just like the Iraqis should have paid for the Iraq War with oil. So, but the left wants to make this into a racist thing. It's not racist. It's called being made whole again for damage that was done for whatever reason.
Larry, I would offer this. I was watching NBC, of all things, to view the president's speech about coronavirus, and Lester Holt and some of his guests were commenting that the Democrats had a different plan for what to do with this $50 billion that was focused on, rather than relief for small businesses, which are going to be very hurt in a short period of time because they just don't have the cash reserves and the wherewithal to weather this kind of storm. President Trump's plan bolsters the Small Business Association. The Democrats want to give this money to people who are out of work already, which I'm not trying to be insensitive to people who are in need, but if you're already out of work, it doesn't seem like a radical change to your lifestyle to not have customers, to have a business slow down. It's business as usual if you have no job.
Yeah, you're right. It's just simply income distribution. I mean, that's all it amounts to. But again, why does the American taxpayer, when we're going to be hurting, everybody's going to be hurting, why do we have to foot the bill? Why isn't our government, in fact, demanding from China reparations? Talk about reparations. This is the proper place for reparations. And I can assure you, once this lawsuit's filed in the next few days on behalf of class action, victims in terms of their health, victims in terms of their businesses, you're going to see the Justice Department intervene and defend the government of China. Mark my words. That will happen. That's what happens.
Let me take you guys back for a moment to Michael Tiger, because we're talking about how Angela Davis and Bernardine Dohrn have endorsed his book. But isn't it correct? I was looking into Mr. Tiger a bit online. Isn't it correct that he once served as defense attorney for Angela Davis, and wasn't she accused of murder? These guys have all been involved in violent crimes.
Well, I wouldn't call it corrupt, Jason. I mean, you can represent criminals. I won't if I think somebody's guilty, but it shows his ideology is that he supports people who are communists. He supports people who are socialists. He supports people who, will brand other people white supremacists and things like that. And he also defended, in the Oklahoma City bombing, individuals there, Timothy McVeigh and others. And, that's the difference between Tiger and me. I won't defend those people. I don't care if they're right-wing terrorists or left-wing terrorists. I'm not going to defend them. And but he has no moral principles. And look, he's wearing a Cuba T-shirt, Cuba 78. Okay, with Ramon Castro there. And look at the thank you letter from Fidel, effusive to him, written in Spanish. I had it translated. He's proud of that. And, what sunk Bernie Sanders? When Bernie Sanders praised Castro, the American people are not ready for this. So how does the D.C. bar let somebody like this sit on a hearing committee? I don't understand it.
You raise an important point that I want to emphasize, because I want our audience to know that whenever anybody's evaluating a criminal defense attorney, whether it's Michael Tiger or certainly Alan Dershowitz, we must have attorneys who are willing to defend even the most horrendous criminals, because if any of us want to enjoy the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, that is a right that has to be jealously defended. And I didn't mean to disparage the guy for doing that, but as you said, it does show where his ideology goes.
It does.
And speaking of defense attorneys, shout out to Don West, who was George Zimmerman's defense attorney. And it's so rare those guys actually get to defend an innocent man. They really relish it. So, but Tiger but Angela Davis is an interesting case. And Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe she was the one who smuggled the guns in to the George Jackson trial, and they ended up shooting in their way out of there, and people were killed. And yet now she's goes on to have a distinguished career as a professor, just like Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dohrn.
Oh, well, where did I get the picture of Tiger with Ramon Castro, the thank you letter from Fidel, the picture in the Cuba T-shirt from the University of Texas School of Law, okay?
Whoa.
Our law schools have become radical left, okay? Tiger taught at my alma mater, Duke Law. I didn't go to Duke Law School. I went to Emory Law School, but Duke University. Duke's become the Berkeley of the South. I wouldn't send my kid there if it was the last place on earth.
And Bernardine Kern was at Northwestern, if I'm not mistaken.
And Bill Ayers, University of Illinois in Chicago.
Well, and look at Brett Kavanaugh. I didn't care for Kavanaugh because he doesn't have a great respect for the Fourth Amendment, and I had a experience with him when I got those 2 preliminary injunctions. He thought it was okay for the government to engage in mass surveillance, but I sympathized with him on how he was set up and destroyed with phony allegations of sexual harassment and assault. And, this is the kind of stuff that we go through today. And, the smearing of people and using means to do that. And the left knows no bounds. It knows no bounds. And when you're dealing here with, a bar, the bar has to be pure, because on the bar's website, they just took it off because I cite it in briefs. It says the DC bar is not only to protect those who complain against lawyers, but to protect lawyers who are subject to frivolous complaints. They removed that from their website. And just recently, because I keep citing it in legal briefs.
Right. The court is your refuge of last resort. And to the Florida court's credit, they acquitted George Zimmerman, But if you cannot trust that, if you think even that is going to be subverted, as it has been in D.C., given just the overwhelming political nature of that populace, it's almost inevitable. I don't even know when the trials go on in D.C. Political
people
trials.
have lost faith in the legal system, and just yesterday, Chelsea Manning, who I'm not a fan of, tried to kill herself. Apparently, she lost faith in the legal system. I would suspect that Weinstein will soon be doing the same thing. I mean, these people are terrible people, granted, but I'm not so sure Chelsea Manning is that terrible, but Weinstein certainly is. And they lose faith in the legal system. If you lose faith in the legal system, then you are in a revolution. You are in it because there are protectors, the judges, the lawyers, the others.
Let me take you guys back for a moment to this comment about the Oklahoma City bombing of the Murrah building. We've done a lot of interviews with Cody Snodgrass, who is an Iraq War veteran, and he cited a lot of evidence that questions whether it was just a fertilizer-based truck bomb that caused all this damage to the building. And we've heard about how these law firms, we've spoken quite a lot about Perkins Coie and what's the Eric Holder one?
Williams and Connolly,
how there's this revolving door through the Justice Department. There's this club where they protect each other. And in the case of your client, Dr. Jerome Corsi, there are even efforts where, as you said, Larry, innocent people are framed for crimes that they didn't do. Jack, have you written at all about the Oklahoma City bombing? Do you know about it?
In Oklahoma City, I would say, there's a lot of theories this way and that, but one thing that strikes me as almost indisputable is that someone was with Timothy McVeigh that day in Oklahoma City. There were 30 eyewitnesses that said so. The FBI verified much. This was the famous John Doe number 2, who is identified universally as a short, swarthy, dark-skinned guy who was with McVeigh. I don't think there's any doubt McVeigh was involved. I don't even think there's any doubt that Nichols was peripherally involved. But I do seriously doubt that they were uniquely responsible for that destruction of that building.
No, as a matter of fact, quite coincidentally, I represented some of the families of those who died in Oklahoma City when I was at Judicial Watch. We brought a lawsuit. And I remember that Terry Nichols' wife had given a deposition in the Philippines as she was dying, if I'm recollecting this correctly, where she said that, in fact, Saddam Hussein was in part behind this, as well as an alliance with neo-Nazis in this country. Now, look at the assassination of Kennedy. Many people think it was the CIA, the mafia, and others who, collaborated to get rid of Kennedy because he was soft on communism and that kind of. They viewed him as such after the Bay of Pigs. So these coalitions can be put together, and to this day we don't know the reason for Oklahoma City fundamentally. And of course, the government rushed to have Timothy McVeigh put to death after it was found that there was exculpatory evidence that was never presented at trial. So in that respect, Tiger representing him, I don't blame him for that, but it does show his political ideology. He wants to represent people who, frankly, want to take this country apart, because the goal of Marxists, as occurred in Russia, is that you first have to destroy the current system, and then you put it back the way you want to put it. In this case, in a communist mold where the ends justify the means. And that's what's going on today with all these radical groups that have very little in common. And if they succeed in taking this country over politically or through force, they'll start fighting with each other. I mean, just one example, feminists and radical Muslims. They have nothing in common. The Muslims want to, and gays and lesbians and transgenders, the Muslims want to kill them. That's part of the Quran.
Right.
On the radical side of Islam.
Gays, the other one wants to execute them. I don't know where you find the middle ground. This is the whole intersectional thing where all these disparate groups come together because they're all oppressed and they want to share their oppression. But it's a untenable coalition. It's unstable. And Larry's exactly right. We already see it coming apart because the center left can't abide the deep left for fear that people will catch on to leftism in general and throw them at Congress as well as the White House. So
yeah, instead, the left wing of the Democrat Party is now opting for a brain dead president just to simply occupy space. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and I said, how can he's leftist, and I have leftist friends. Christopher Hitchens was a friend of mine, but I said, how could you vote for Biden? I mean, the guy's not there mentally. Okay, he's got dementia, perhaps Alzheimer's. I mean, he's going to die of a stroke. It looks like he could pass out at any moment. He says, well, we just want someone in there as a placeholder until things die down. I said, well, think of this alternative. You might have Hillary Clinton as a vice president. What happens if he dies?
Right.
Well, if she was my vice president. But what's really going to be fun is the Obama faction versus the Hillary faction to see who controls the fragment of a person that is now occupying Joe Biden's body, We shall see how that plays out.
Well, you wrote a book about Ron Brown's body, but we've got a living body in Joe Biden. He's dead man walking.
That could be an excellent follow-up for you, Jack. Just real quickly, one more question with regard to the Timothy McVeigh defense. Shouldn't it be incumbent on his attorney to jealously pursue this exculpatory evidence, Larry? I mean, that's the key role of the defense attorney.
I believe the Tiger did, but the government rammed it down the throat of the judge. This is another example of judges. The judges have become slavish slaves, for lack of a better matter, to the establishments of both political parties. And it was time for Timothy McVeigh to be executed before we found out the truth. And
historically, as Larry will attest, and those people who are younger may not remember this, but Bill Clinton's fortunes were revived in the ashes of Oklahoma City. He was headed for a one-term presidency. There was a disastrous midterm election. The Republican Revolution had swept the Congress out for the first time in 40 or 50 years. And then all of a sudden, soon as they found McVeigh, the media went full bore right-wing revolution. Words have consequences. They blamed it on Rush Limbaugh. They blamed it on Newt Gingrich. Clinton came down to Oklahoma City, held hands. He was very good at that. And then the Republican Revolution died in Oklahoma City. It really did. And then from that point on, I mean, Clinton's approval rating went up 10 or 15 points after Oklahoma City. Wow. Just like, curiously, Janet Reno's went up after Waco. The media control at that time was getting to be sufficiently powerful that they could turn any event that had something to do with right-wingers in any which way against the right and in favor of the left. Who knew, for instance, that there were more minorities than white people at Waco? I mean, that was a fact that was incredibly suppressed, Waco, we just saw white people, rednecks, we didn't care about them. We weren't allowed to care about them, not knowing that 39 of the 74 dead were racial minorities, 27 of them were black.
Well,
even Jesse Jackson doesn't know that.
And Jack points out something strong, and we only have a few minutes left, Jason, so I'd like to end with this thought. Why did we fight the American Revolution? The primary reason was when King George III took our criminal justice system back to the court of St. James in London. He stole our legal system and took our rights away from us. We didn't have a legal system at that point. And that's where we are today. And that's why we need to make sure that we have purity in Congress, that we have purity in the executive branch, that we have purity on the federal judiciary and in the state judiciaries, and why bar associations must administer to the rules of ethics for lawyers fairly and without any kind of bias and prejudice. Because once we lose our legal system, then we lose everything. And that's our only protection against the tyranny of the government, other than resorting to violence, which I don't want to see. And it was Jefferson who said, when the people fear the government, there's tyranny, but when the government fears the people, there's liberty. But we don't want to get to that. We want a legal system. We want judges. We want legislatures. We want the executive branch, and we want the bars that regulate American lawyers who are the advocates for the American people to be neutral and to be independent. And we don't have that today. At least in terms of the District of Columbia, it's been hijacked by a bunch of radical leftists in the Disciplinary Counsel's office. And I'm sure there are good people in the Board of Governors and elsewhere, and I hope that they see the light here with people like Tiger, because you cannot allow someone like this to have such power. Because what's already happened with this 33-month suspension is I've been smeared, I've been defamed, and the damage has largely been done, even though I'm confident of success in the end. Because, that's what the left does. They'll destroy you. And my clients, and Jack can attest to this, and so can you, have become radioactive because of what the left has done to them, whether it's Chief Justice Roy Moore, whether it's Sheriff Joe Arpaio, whether it's George Zimmerman, whether it's Laura Loomer, whether it's people like that. They destroy you, and to the point where, I know you won't see any of them on Fox News because Fox runs away from it because they need advertisers and they need dollars. And that's why the social media and your show is so important, Jason, and what Jack does in his writings, because we are the honest underground. That's what we are, because now we're kind of running from this leftist onslaught, and we're fighting back with whatever means we have. And thank God for you, Jason, and Crowdsource the Truth and others like you. And by the way, please go to my website at ClaymanLegalDefense.com.
Sorry, real quick, Larry. Yeah,
please go to the website at ClaymanLegalDefenseFund.com, because this is going to be an endeavor which will cost several $100,000, if not $1 million in the end. I mean,
wow.
With all that's going.
And there's the punishment right there. Whatever the outcome, you're getting drained. I mean, this is what they do to everybody, isn't it, Jack? Dr. Corsi, Roger Stone, even the civil cases that have been brought against me are occupying so much time, so much money, travel, as Larry says, being smeared in social media and the news. Jack, what do you say?
Yeah, no, in fact, that's what the thesis of my book, Masking Obama, is about. It's about the fight for individual citizen journalists, legal representatives like Larry, to tell the truth. And there's a cost to that now. There's an excellent chance you could be arrested, you could be sued, you could be thrown in prison in some cases. You're certainly going to be smeared and defamed. That's the given. That's for starters. And this is being done by people in higher and higher places. And that's the scary part about it.
Well, it was reported during the Obama administration that it had a list of subversives.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that we're all under surveillance. And, if you're not careful, look out.
Yeah. But keep up the good work, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack. And mutually, we need people like you and Jason.
And Jack, when's the book going to be available? It's for pre-order now on Amazon?
It's available on Amazon right now for pre-order, but it won't be published until August.
For
whatever publishers have these incredibly long schedules. So you just got to live with that,
Yeah. Well, we'll certainly have you back when the book is out or before. Always enjoy having you on. Larry, great to see you as well. Best of luck in this disciplinary action. And I know the comments are very fixated on the duration of time and all of that kind of stuff. But we'll be back soon. We'll speak to Larry about this as it progresses, and we've got a lot more coming up later today. So stay tuned to Crowdsource the Truth. If you're not yet a sponsor and you're watching and enjoying the shows each day, please visit subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Coming up at 5 p.m., we've got Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America, and that's a sponsor-exclusive show, so get over there and join us for that. Thanks so much, gentlemen. Have a great day, and thanks, everybody, for watching.
Thank you. God bless, guys.